welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam VECENIE. We are presented by The Athletic and CLNS Media. Today on the show, we've got good friend of the program here, CJ Moore. We're going to do another college basketball preview. It's going to be the Big 12. CJ, how's it going, man? This conference has been ruled by the Kansas Jayhawks, which I'm sure you're not terribly disappointed about, over the course of the last decade plus. Just generally here, how is your life going, first and foremost? And then second, what do you think the Big 12 season is going to look like?
Sam, good to hear from you, man. Life has been kind of hectic and busy, working on a big project that I can't really talk much about right now, but it's going to be cool. I think people are going to be excited when I can talk about it when it comes out. But the Big 12, I think, is going to be interesting this season. I mean, obviously, I think you put Kansas as number one, and this was always kind of the year where I circled as, okay, that would be the year maybe the streak would be in jeopardy, just looking at how the roster was constructed and how some things could go. But their roster looks better, I think, than I would have maybe anticipated a couple of years ago because of, adding a guy like Malik Newman is huge, and then keeping Devontae Graham around and some of the other pieces. And but the rest of the league, you look at it and, like, there's not one team that you think, okay, could this be the team that is good enough to break it out? Maybe West Virginia, but I'm not sure they have the pieces to end the streak. So I feel like it's another year where it's KU at number one, then we try to figure out what the rest is.
Yeah, I agree with that. So let's just kind of dive in, because Kansas is obviously the first team we're going to start with. For those of you who are not familiar with the way that I do previews, I don't do it in order of the way that I think the league is going to finish. I just kind of do it in order of the teams that I find most interesting. It's impossible to start a Big 12 preview, though, in that way and not go with Kansas first. So you mentioned Malik Monk, obviously a big-time transfer.
Malik Newman.
Malik Newman.
He is a little Malik Monk in him. So
he does. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
But Malik Newman, big-time transfer. Charlie Moore, Dedrick Lawson, KJ Lawson, all sitting out this year. Sam Cunliffe, another example of a transfer. What do you think of this new strategy that Bill Self seems to be employing that involves him taking chances on transfers that may not have worked out as well at other universities?
I think it's pretty smart. I mean, you look around college basketball, and it's it's a copycat league almost. Fred Hoiberg did so well at Iowa State, kind of with this model, and then on a bigger level, you've seen Gonzaga do really well with it. Mm-hmm. And maybe you don't think of Kansas as being a program that would go that route, but a guy like Malik Newman, was a top 5 recruit, and when you're getting him for maybe a year, maybe two, getting a kid like that who's now in his third year of college, when he's just going to be a 1 or 2 year guy, is so much, I think, going to be so much more valuable to you in a season than maybe a one and done freshman is going to be, just because the learning curve's not as steep. You get to have him around for a year to learn your program. And, Dedrick Lawson, for instance, I think is going to be one of the best players in college basketball when he's eligible in a year. And
let's get Dedrick to the point where he is actually suiting up for Kansas at this stage, given some of the issues that have happened.
That's a good point. But let's say that if that one works out, I mean, I think Dedrick Lawson's going to be really, really, really good. So I think it's smart in a way that you get these kids who are not necessarily one and done level talents, but close, but they're better players just because of age and the fact they've been around, and you get to have them around in their program for so long. Would you say that's fair?
I think it's an interesting way to look at it, for sure. Having a third-year guy now in Malik Newman, a little bit older, I believe he's going to be 21, right, by the time this thing is done this year. That seems valuable to me. Having a tried and true player who was okay at Mississippi State. He wasn't top 10 recruit level, as his talent would indicate, but he was, a solid freshman basketball player in the SEC at least. Went to the NBA draft combine, didn't get the information that he was looking for, and decided to return to school and transfer. I like the idea of mixing him, for instance, with a guy in Devontae Graham, who I'm sure we'll talk about in a little bit later, who is, a potential All-American this season. I like the idea of mixing him with LeGerald Vick, Svi, guys who have been there for 4 years, who can help him along a little bit. And the other key here is that getting those guys in allows them to practice with the team for a year and gets them a little bit more used to the system, which in Bill Self's case, there have been some players who have struggled to adjust to what Bill Self kind of wants these guys to do, right, as freshmen. And, he has a reputation for, having freshmen not necessarily living up to their, pre-college basketball hype. And, maybe this strategy is a way of mitigating that almost. It's a really interesting idea, I think.
And look at the kid that's probably been one of the most successful one-and-done guys for him was Ben McLemore. And Ben McLemore was kind of like a transfer in that he had to sit out for a year. So I think that year in the program really is valuable. His McLemore's learning curve was way less steep than some of the other guys that have had to come through because he had that year in the program. So I think that's, I'm of the belief that I think just from listening to the coaches, hearing what Newman was like in practice last year, catching some of the stuff that they went overseas this summer and watching some of the highlights there. I think Malik Newman's going to be their best player, and
wow.
at least their leading scorer. I think he's going to maybe surprise some people just based off, like you said, his year at Mississippi State was very average, but I think he's going to end up leading KU in scoring and put up some really good numbers. So I like their backcourt a lot. I like like you said, having a guy like Svi and Vic. I think you'll see progress from those guys just as much time as they spend around the program. And it's going to be a weird Kansas team because once again I think they're going to end up playing small. They have Billy Preston there. And you would think maybe Billy Preston is the starting four-man, but I get the impression that he's going to be a guy, at least early on, that comes off the bench. And, they end up starting Svi and Vic. And it's a little stranger fit because with Josh Jackson last year, he was more of a natural small ball four. He could guard opposing big guys. He had the length. He had the size. He's just such a versatile threat where LeGerald Vick maybe has a little bit of that, but he's kind of a smaller version, and it's going to be a little more difficult, I think, for them defensively because of they don't have a guy like Jackson, but I do think you're going to see them play small a lot.
Well, we talked about like how skinny Josh Jackson was last year, and you did a great job throughout the year breaking down what some of his defensive issues were in terms of over-aggression and kind of putting himself out of position, but also he wasn't a guy that could really guard the post all that well either. He's aggressive and tough, but he's not strong. Mm-hmm. I mean, Josh Jackson has like 30 pounds on LeGerald Vick.
Yeah. And he really did late in the year, I think he did a good job of figuring out how to use his quickness. Like you go to that Purdue game and he made Biggie Swanigan pretty ineffective just because of the fact that it made it tough for him to get touches because he would not let him put his weight on him and get around him. So I think Vic's got to kind of learn from that a little bit. But Vic isn't nowhere near the instinctual player that Jackson is, where Jackson could kind of figure things out as he went. So that's going to be a challenge for them. But at the same time, they have Udoka Azubuike in the back who will maybe help offer some rim protection and give them kind of the length they need. Landon Lucas was an awesome defender, but maybe didn't have quite the length that Azubuike will at the rim. So maybe that helps offset that a little bit. One guy we haven't talked about that I think is going to play maybe more of a factor than you would anticipate, and kind of talking to their coaches, I was at Self's Hall of Fame thing a couple weeks ago, and they're really, really high on Marcus Garrett. I think he's going to get a guy that surprises people just based on maybe where he was ranked in the rankings and stuff. I think he's going to be one of those guys. It seems like those type of guys that aren't super high, maybe like 4-star guys that go to Kansas, end up being better than you think and end up being really good program guys. So he's like a 6'5", 6'6", played point guard in high school, and I think he'll play a lot of different positions this coming year for Kansas. He could maybe factor in more than you'd anticipate. Yeah,
Garrett's going to allow them to play small more often almost, right? Like he's 6'5", like you said, he can play some lead guard stuff. You can take one of Devontae Graham or Malik Newman off the floor and still play small if Marcus Garrett can play an impact immediately, which I've heard similar things that you have. They got him. he's another Devontae Graham, Frank Mason type. When they recruited him, he was not nearly as high in the rankings as what he even rose to by the time that he was, done with his high school career. I think he was like, a consensus like top 60 kid by the time he was done. I don't think he was even remotely close to that whenever they recruited him and saw what they saw in him. So if they can bring out and find another kind of steal guy in Marcus Garrett, that's going to be a big piece for them playing small. Like we mentioned, Svi and LeGerald Vick, they're going to have to play critical roles on this team. Sam Cunliffe as well, I think, is going to have to play a role on this team, if only because he's 6'6", and this team lacks players that are 6'6" or taller. Just looking at what's on the roster, and Mitch Lightfoot, Billy Preston, and Udoka Azubuike, Svi is 6'8" as well, but Svi plays like a guard. You know what I mean? Like,
for sure. Yeah. He's got really short arms, and he's anytime he tried to play that small ball 4 spot last year, defensively, he just couldn't do it. So that's why it's going to really fall on Vic, I think, to really come through there.
Yeah, and you mentioned Udoka Azubuike, and it seems like Kansas and people around the Kansas program have a much higher opinion of him than I do. I get the appeal. He is 7 feet tall. He's super, super long, very physical. He wants to play the kind of style that Bill Self wants from players, but he has like an offensive lineman lower half, which scares me. He has those super thick thighs and very thick calves, which kind of makes him struggle to move. He's a plotter. And, maybe with the more mobile perimeter defense that they're clearly going to have to play because of just the fact that they're going to have to play small, that could help him a little bit in pick and roll coverage. But, he's still like a 17, 18-year-old dude that is, he's been there for multiple years. But, from a skill perspective, I don't really see that he has a ton of skill set. He's just kind of a 7-foot dude that's long and can, play around the rim. And that's really it whenever I've watched him. He was a guy that I thought was kind of overrated coming out of high school, I guess.
All right. So I'm with you a lot here, because when I watched him in high school, I also thought he was going to struggle last year at Kansas. I will say he actually did better and came along faster last season. Obviously it was a shortened year because of his injury, but he was better than I thought he'd be. Are you with me there? Like he ended up coming along quicker than I anticipated, just off watching him in high school and how much he struggled to move. I thought he moved a little better than I was going to anticipate. Are you with me there?
Yeah, in so much as I didn't think he would be playable last year.
Yeah,
and he was playable.
I'm with you, and he was. And he was really starting to kind of come along, right when he got hurt. So that's too bad. We didn't really get to see. But I'm like you. I think he's limited offensively, and that he's really good at dunking and overpowering people. But in terms of trying to make a post move and stuff like that, he's a little bit limited. So I think they're going to do a lot of perimeter stuff like they did last season, and kind of play through their guards more so than old school Bill Self teams that play through the post. I mean, I think they're going to try to get him angles and get him some post touches, but maybe not as heavy a load as some guys that have had in the past. And then I also think
so real quick though, he's going to play like 20 minutes a game probably, right?
No. He's got to play closer to 30. Where are they going to go?
Well, that's what I was going to bring up. They're going to play. I would guess they're going to play small a lot, and Billy Preston. The point I was going to make is I would bet Billy Preston plays more 5 than he plays 4.
He's going to be their backup 5, but I also think they're going to play some with the both of them. So I
think they will too, for what it's worth.
Yeah, I think Azubuike's got to play pretty heavy minutes. I think he's got to play anywhere from 26 to 30 minutes a night. So
do we think he can do that?
Here's the thing that my question with Kansas. Defensively, I look at this group and I think, okay, maybe they're going to play kind of like, you remember when Jeff Withey was in the back and they were really able to pressure up on the wings and pressure and it kind of funnel the ball to Withey, and he was such a great shot blocker that defense was really, really effective. Now, Azubuike is not that level of shot blocker, but he's got shot blocking ability. So on paper, you kind of think, okay, they got all these guards. He's the only big guy. Maybe they play like that. Maybe they really, really pressure. But the challenge of doing that, the danger in doing that is Azubuike is also pretty foul prone, and you're going to run the risk of getting him in foul trouble. So it's going to be kind of interesting to see how they figure things out defensively. I think offensively, you don't really worry about them that much, but defensively, it might be a little bit of a struggle trying to figure out how the pieces fit together. And yeah, I think Billy Preston will play a lot of backup five. I think the challenge of getting through to him is going to be something that's a big storyline, especially early on for Kansas, because I think he's a guy that obviously has a lot of talent, but the learning curve for him is going to be kind of steep, and he's going to, I think it's going to be a challenge for Self to kind of a give and take, kind of like Kelly Oubre maybe early in his career, where it took him a little while to figure it out, but he had a lot of ability, and if he does figure it out like Kelly kind of did, he could be a really effective player for them.
Yeah, that I definitely agree with. Like, I don't really think that Billy Preston, from what I've seen of him, strikes me as a Bill Self kind of player, I guess, but
he wants toughness and those kinds of things. He kind of wants to be a perimeter type guy, right?
Yeah, that doesn't make a ton of sense to me, but, Billy made his choice, and I hope that it really works out.
Yeah.
With Azubuike, he averaged 9 fouls per 40 minutes last year. That's an issue. Like, he literally can't play more than 23 minutes from a math perspective per game.
Now he is a year older, hopefully he figures some of that out a little better, but
conditioning too, do we think he can play 30 minutes a game in terms of conditioning?
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I will say Andrea Hootie is about as good as he gets in the business, and already made a lot of progress with him last season, because like I said, I thought he was farther along than I anticipated. I was like you. I didn't think he was going to be able to play much last year and really wouldn't be effective. And when he got hurt, he was a starter. So we'll see. I think there's an impression around that program that maybe he's gone after this year, and that's one thing that I don't see. Like, what about him?
I've heard similar things that
What about him screams NBA talent right now? I mean, he maybe 20 years ago, he would have been a guy that was appealing to the NBA, but the issues we've talked about already, trying to get him to guard out on the perimeter and involving him in a ball screen, stuff like that, and the fact that he really doesn't score other than just dunking and overpowering people. I think he's going to be a program guy that's around for a few years, unless he makes kind of a silly decision, but that could be good for Kansas, because he could become a really, really valuable guy as they coach him up through the years, because he does, in the college game, he can be effective. I think you can hide those guys more so than you can in the NBA game.
Yeah, I have no idea how he plays in the NBA, to be honest. I just don't get the appeal of his game at all. If he was to leave this year based on what we've seen of him so far, he would go undrafted. That's just kind of what it is. I hope he stays for that reason. He would need to make such categorical leaps this year in his game that I just don't know. He turned the ball over on 27% of his possessions last year that he got touches on. He averaged 9 fouls per 40 minutes. It's I agree with you. The reputation of what he has around the Kansas program, it seems like what people think he's going to be this year, it doesn't really mesh with where I'm at on him. And I don't think we need to belabor that point, but more than that, this roster is just weird. I can't remember a Bill Self roster that looks anything like this. And because of that, there's a bit of uncertainty this year in the way that, they're still going to win the Big 12, I think, but contending on a national scale, which is something they have basically done for a decade now, I am a little bit more skeptical on that.
Yeah, it really hurt them losing and I've already forgotten the kid's name, the kid that transferred in, had the sweet mustache and was there for 2 minutes and then left.
Are you talking about Dwight Colby?
No. They had another kid, and he's a white kid, Jack Whitman. I can't even remember where he was out of. He was out of a school in the Northeast, I think. He was going to be a guy that he transferred in. He was a grad transfer. Give them just another big body, and would be able to fill some minutes. And he left after like a couple weeks, and so that's going to hurt them. Now Mitch Lightfoot's a guy that'll eat up some minutes.
Yep.
And is still around. I think they maybe wish they still had Dwight Colby, maybe, but just because they need another minutes eater. But
they just need a body.
You just need a body. So that's the concern for this team, the front court depth for sure. But man, they have an endless amount of wings. So I don't think you worry about their wings or their perimeter, but Azubuike is going to have a pretty darn good year and be able to stay on the floor for them to reach their ceiling. And I think we've maybe been a little harder on him than is fair. I mean, Sam, you're really an Azubuike hater. I thought I was the guy that was tough on him, man.
No, that's what I mean. Like I don't mean to belabor the point. Like I don't know that we need to do more.
Yeah. He is very, very important to their success this year, especially if Preston's going to go through some growing pains.
Who do you think has a better year, Billy Preston or Udoka Azubuike?
I think Azubuike does.
Okay. I might take Billy Preston, and I'm not even like super high on Preston in Kansas.
Yeah, I mean they've Billy Preston, you say he's not a Bill Self kind of guy. I think maybe from like a personality standpoint, that's maybe where we're coming from. But I will say, But the skill set is kind of goes back to like a more Marcus Morris, maybe like, not as much Julian Wright, but a little bit Julian. I mean, he's had guys like that.
Yeah, I like the Marcus Morris
really well in their system. So I think Dedrick Lawson's going to be kind of like a Marcus Morris next year. I mean, that's getting ahead of ourselves, but if he is able to stay around, I think that's a guy that's going to fit really well. But yeah, Preston, it could be a hard fit at first, but if he gets it, he could be really valuable to them. Yeah,
just a funky roster. I don't really know what else to say.
It is. It's one of the strangest rosters I think I've ever seen at Kansas, but I still think they could be really good if the pieces end up fitting the right way.
And by the way,
Azubuike is very important to that.
Like we just talked about, how they have essentially 3 bigs on this roster and are going to rely on like Svi and, LeGerald Vic to play some 4. Yeah. Svi's playing 20 pounds lighter than what he played last year, apparently now. Like that just came out that like he's 20 pounds less than what he weighed last year. So he wants to maintain more explosiveness, and that's great. I kind of think the size would help.
He needed to lose that. He got a little slow-footed last year.
He did.
I think he needed to lose that. I think that's a good thing for him. So, hopefully the strength is still there, or whatever strength he had is still there. But I think that losing the weight was. I see where you're coming from there. But like I said, I think he's the 3-man and Vic's the 4-man. So if he lost that weight, you might want to throw that on Vic.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fascinating roster, and that's before we've even talked about Devontae Graham. He is, for me, one of the most interesting, complete offensive guards in all of college basketball. He can knock down shots off the catch, off the dribble, really, really good in the pick and roll, can pass the ball really well, can create off the dribble, can get into the middle of the defense, has a good floater game, has relative size to where he's a decent finisher inside. I just like everything about his game, to be honest. He's just a kind of a complete offensive player for the college game.
Yeah, really good kid too, and will be kind of their leader this season. I think the key for him is because they aren't going to throw it into the post as much, and just like last year, what helped so much last season was Frank Mason and Josh Jackson could get to the rim and finish. Mm-hmm. And Malik Newman's going to be a guy that, he relies a lot on his mid-range game and his jump shot. So Graham has in the past as well. Like if you look at his numbers last year, he wasn't a very good finisher around the basket. Not that he can't do it, but I think that's the area where he's going to have to grow the most, because he's going to have to get to the rim and kind of get them some easy buckets that way. But I think it's going to be a real good fit for him. Mason was the guy that was on the ball more last year, but I think Graham's a more natural point guard and more natural facilitator and a better passer. So I think moving over from that 2 spot to the 1 is going to be a really easy transition for him. And I think he's going to have a really nice season as kind of an all, like you said, an all around good guard.
Yeah, no, I think that he could have an All-American type season. I think that, you mentioned you think Malik Newman might be their best player. I would still probably take Devontae Graham. I feel like you might be right that Malik Newman has a higher ceiling for sure, but, Devontae Graham, you just know what you're getting from him.
Yeah, and it might not be fair to say Newman's their best player. I think it'll be close between those two. I do think Newman leads them in scoring.
Yeah,
because Graham's going to become more of a kind of have a maybe like Monte Morris type of season.
That's an interesting one. I like that. I like that a lot. Let's move on though. We both have Kansas winning the Big 12, even with their funky ass roster. We're going to get into why that's true because Texas, to me, is the next most interesting team. I don't think they're the next best team. But they do have a guy in Mohamed Bamba who comes in. They have Matt Coleman who can allow, Andrew Jones to slide off to the 2 a little bit more often now. Kerwin Roach, Eric Davis, highly recruited guys. Jericho Sims, Jace Febbs, or whatever the hell his name is. I forget how to pronounce it. But those guys are interesting freshmen. It's a really talented group of players. I'm unclear on how all of the pieces are going to fit together from a floor spacing perspective and from anything beyond just a long athletic perspective.
Yeah, the two issues I think that roster really had last year were, one, they didn't have a point guard, and they did address that in Matt Coleman. So that's going to help. They need a guy that will be a setup man because that's just not Andrew Jones. He's more of a combo guard that needs to be off the ball. So I think that getting Matt Coleman will definitely be help their efficiency and help their offense. But you already hit on it, floor spacing. I mean, that was a team that really, really, really struggled to shoot the ball last season. Looking at their 3-point percentage now, 29% last season. And I asked, I can't remember what recruiting guy it was, maybe Bossy, because I didn't get a chance. I didn't get out on the circuit last year. I didn't get to see the recruits that they have coming in, other than I've seen Bamba several times. But I asked, I said, are any of these guys coming in knockdown shooters? Because that's what they need, right? You'd think they would have gone out and gotten some knockdown shooters. I think they went out and got some really nice, talented guys, but I don't think they addressed that issue, and I think that's a huge concern for them on the offensive end.
Yeah, no. On the plus side, like you said, Matt Coleman is a very real point guard. He is going to be able to run pick and rolls. He's going to be able to, be a great partner with Mohamed Bamba, who for me is still at his best as a pick and roll diving big man, right? Where you can just literally lob it up as high as you want and he will catch it. It's just the way it works whenever you're 7 feet tall with a 7'9" wingspan. You mentioned the shooting aspect. Feb, I forget how the hell to say his name, but he is a shooter. That guy that's basically what he does. He's a shooter. Beyond him, though, they didn't really go out and get a ton of shooters. Eric Davis and Kerwin Roach and Andrew Jones, those guys, and Jones is obviously a lot better than those guys, but those guys aren't shooters. They're not going to be knockdown guys who are really going to help them space the floor. They're going to be athletic and they're going to be able to, play the defensive scheme that Shaka Smart wants to do as long as they buy in on that end. This team could be a terror defensively if everyone buys in. I'm skeptical on everything kind of working out, though.
They could be, but he's got all these athletes now. I'm curious. Do you think he's going to go back to playing kind of a havoc style? Because I don't know that he will, just because he hasn't done that at Texas yet. And last year it kind of would have made sense. They were really, really good defensively last year, but look at their numbers. I mean, average possession length. Their opponents held the ball longer than almost every 304 in terms of average possession length.
Sure.
They didn't create a lot of turnovers. They held teams to low percentages shooting, which was good, and they had a really, really good defense. So it's hard to criticize there. But you think it would have been a team that they would have tried to push the tempo and try to turn people over, and they haven't done that. And I think one reason they haven't done that at Texas is because he wants to go out and he wants to get really, really high level recruits. And it's hard to get a kid to, come to your school when you're like, okay, we're going to play this crazy style and you're going to play, but we're going to play 9 or 10 guys. 5-star guys want to come in and they want to play 30-plus minutes a game, right? So when you play the Havoc style, it's kind of tough to do that. But now they have all these athletes, and they have the roster where a guy like Bamba in the back, they have the roster where you think that makes a lot of sense. But I don't know if they will do it or not.
Yeah, if I was them, that's what I would be doing. I do understand that, it might not help from a recruiting perspective, but I do think that he can sell to recruits. Hey, look, for my first 2 years at Texas, I played regular. I will play normal. It's just that on this roster right now, it makes most sense for me to get out and really, really play that Havoc, really play that heavy press system. It just makes the most sense for this roster we have. So I would think he can still sell that to recruits, but you do bring up an interesting point on the long-term viability of this if he wants to, continue to be a player for top, 30 recruits as he is right now.
Yeah, and if you have success, it definitely helps that. But I think he almost, I hope to see them go to that this year, because I think you have to coach to your personality. And that's what he's had success with, and that's what he has been passionate about in the past is playing that style. I think he's got to get back to that, and now they have the roster that really, really, really makes sense to do that. So that's my biggest question with Texas is how are they going to play? Yeah,
and if they play slow, like they're still going to be a terror in like the half court defense just because.
Oh yeah, just because of athletes and length.
Yeah, like no one's going to finish on them with Mohamed Bamba there, and like even James Banks is a really interesting long-term prospect as well. But like offensively is a major concern right now, and we should talk about Bamba real quick because he is maybe the most high-profile guy in this league this year. Is that not right?
Yeah, I mean, from an NBA perspective, for sure.
Yeah, just even generally, like I would imagine that he's probably going to have the most interest in the Big 12 just because he's going to be a difference maker in college basketball, and he's going to be a difference maker probably in the NBA. Ridiculous shot blocker, ridiculous rim protector, moves his feet unbelievably well on the perimeter for a guy his size. It's hard to compare players to, incumbent all-stars in the NBA, but there is a lot of Rudy Gobert that I see in Mohamed Bamba when I watch him.
Yeah, defensively, I mean, I think he's going to be a great weapon. Now, offensively, you already said it. He's nice in the pick and roll because he moves pretty well, and he can jump up and catch lobs. But in terms of catching the ball in the post and making moves or I don't think he's going to be a guy that averages a lot of points. Like Jared Allen was a much better offensive,
for sure,
has a much better offensive repertoire than Mo's going to have. But he's going to be a very, very valuable piece because of what he can bring on the defensive end. And I think offensively, we talked about their defense. I think the main reason to play the press and to try to turn people over is because that's going to help you more on offense. Because I think you can be an elite defense no matter how you play. But I think offensively their ceiling comes into effect if they're able to turn people over and get playing faster, because they might be a team that struggles in the half court a little bit.
Yeah, and Mo Bamba, there is some speculation out there that he can shoot a little bit. I'm pretty skeptical on that. Having seen his jump shot, I think that it goes sometimes, like it falls sometimes. He'll shoot threes this year, I would guess. But
he has some passing ability to him that'll help. I think he can maybe they could play through him and hope they get teams double, and I think he has some potential to be a nice passer, but scoring wise, he's got a ways to go.
Yeah, let's move on though. We've talked enough about a team that might go like 500 in that league. The team that I want to bring up next is actually a team that I gave you a rundown of the 4 teams I wanted to talk about most. I kind of just forgot about this team, and it's kind of indicative of where the program has been. The third most interesting team in this league to me, though, is TCU. I actually had them in my top 25 that I submitted to the field house earlier last week whenever we had to do that. I am fascinated by this TCU team. Like, I think that they are going to be an NCAA tournament team. I think that they are, a potential top 8 seed in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, and I mean, they return everybody. And look at how weird their season was last year. They're sitting 6-5 in the Big 12, and you're thinking, oh, all right, like this, they might make the NCAA tournament. I mean, wow, Jamie Dixon's done an incredible job. And then they go out and they finish the Big 12 losing their last 7 straight games. And then they go to the Big 12 tournament and they beat Oklahoma by 19. And then they beat Kansas. It was Kansas without Josh Jackson, but still, you beat Kansas in Kansas City. That's impressive. And then they go out and win the NIT. So a fascinating year, and they're a fascinating team. I mean, I really like Alex Robinson and Jalen Fisher in the backcourt. Vladimir, the big kid up front,
Brodzianski.
Yeah, there you go. I wasn't even going to try it. He's talented, a little thin, but he's got some skill to him. Kendrick Williams is a really nice kind of small ball 4 type. And, everybody's back, and we all know Jamie Dixon can really coach. So they're one of those teams that I think could finish as high as 3rd, maybe even 2nd. I don't know, but I have them behind West Virginia and Baylor. But I think they've got some potential to have a really, really good year. Have it being the 2nd year under Jamie Dixon. I think I'm guessing you're like me and think he's really, 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 really bright coach.
He is a wildly underrated coach. Like, there is no circumstance where his name should not come up, in my opinion, whenever you're talking about the top 20 coaches in the country. This guy is incredible at getting programs turned around. The key for them this year is going to be getting more efficiency out of the lead ball handlers, because Alex Robinson and Jalen Fisher last year, I thought they struggled a little bit in terms of turning the ball over. Alex Robinson, 22% turnover rate. Jalen Fisher, 26% turnover rate. They need to just get those guys a little bit more under control. Their best player is Brodzianski. You talk to teams that have played them in the past, they rave about his skill set. He's a guy that can step out and shoot a little bit. He is incredibly efficient in the post. He can draw fouls. He knocks down his foul shots once he gets there. He rebounds. He crashes both sides of the glass. Just a really efficient, skilled basketball player that is going to pay dividends for them this year. I think he's definitely going to be, all Big 12 guy this year for them. You mentioned Williams. Williams is a really good player, 6'7", can kind of, flout that line between the 2 and the 4 now. Desmond Bain is a guy that's
really good athlete.
Good athlete. Came off the bench mostly last year, if I remember correctly. Ended up moving into that starting lineup, though, later on, and played a significant role for them. I think he even got invited to the U19 camp this year and had a chance to make that team before he got cut. He knocked down 38% of his threes, too. He could be in for a big leap. They get in the kid from Pepperdine, Sean Olden, who can play a little bit. There's just a lot of reasons to be excited about, TCU basketball in a way that there haven't been in a long time. And, to me, I have them 3rd right now in this league behind West Virginia and Kansas.
Yeah, I think Baylor. It might be a coin flip between them and Baylor.
We'll talk about Baylor.
Baylor's still going to be pretty good. But I really like what TCU has back, and you can't put enough value on the fact that it's going to be year 2 under Jamie Dixon, especially seeing what that team did in the postseason. We've given him enough already, but I think he's a really, really one of the best coaches in the league and one of the best coaches in the country. So, and it's amazing to be sitting here and talking about them as potentially the 3rd best team in the Big 12 when they have been so bad for so many years. It was really easy every year. You just be like, okay, who's what in Big 12? All right, well, you start TCU at the bottom, you start with Kansas at the top, and then you figure out the rest.
Yep.
But now they're going to be a factor. That was like one of the best hires of the last 5 years, just because of what that program was, and to get him there is going to be so incredible for that program.
Yeah, I would 100% agree. Let's go ahead and move on and talk about that West Virginia team. West Virginia gets back, for me, who is probably the 2nd best player in this league, maybe the best player in this league, in Javon Carter. Incredible defensive basketball player, has really made strides offensively and is now one of the better offensive players in this league as well, just due to the way that he can create turnovers on the defensive end and transition that to offense. He's become a better shooter, really effective player there. They bring back Daxter Miles. They bring back Asa Ahmad. Konate and Bender are back in the front court as well.
Elijah Macon.
Elijah.
I think Elijah May, he might be their best front court player.
Turned pro though, unfortunately.
Oh, he did. Oh, wow. I'm out of it.
But
what was he doing?
A lot of questions there, but regardless, they still bring back quite a few different.
Good prep, CJ. Good prep.
Regardless, they still bring back a lot of really interesting players, though. And within this, like Bob Huggins system, I mean, it's going to be fine. Like they're just all going to slot into place, and they're going to run Press Virginia's style. They're going to just bother the shit out of teams, and everything is going to be great.
Yeah, I mean, it's just West Virginia. It doesn't really matter what the pieces are at this point. It seems like every year they're right up there near the top. And Javon Carter, I mean, getting him back for his 7th, 8th year of eligibility, that was an incredible job by Bob Huggins. I mean, that dude's been around for he's one of those guys that's just been around forever, and it helps that he's probably looks really old too. But yeah, he's an awesome perimeter guy, and I think Ahmad is one that they probably need for them to have a really, really special year and like challenge Kansas. I think he's got to take that next step, and he's one of the more talented guys in their program.
Yeah. I honestly don't have a lot more to say about this team. They're really good.
They are what they are, right? They're going to press you. They're going to play a lot of guys. They're going to have a few guys that are better than you anticipated, and Huggs is going to figure it out. Yeah.
Right. Like that's really all I got. Like they're going to be awesome. Like what do you want me to say? It's a top 15 team. They're probably going to be like a 3, 4, 5 seed in the NCAA tournament, and they're going to bother the shit out of teams. They're going to be an impossible matchup night in and night out. It's about it. That's all you got to say about this team. So let's just kind of move forward again. And I've realized we talked a ton about Texas and Kansas, so we want to move as quickly as possible here. CJ, before we move on, let's pay some bills here. Fantasy football fans, the wait is over. Football is back. That means FanDuel is back. This is fantasy football for everyday fans. There are new contests starting every single week. No busted seasons. There's something for everyone. There are a lot of contests to choose from, all the way from $1 up to hundreds of dollars. Just pick a contest, choose your team, and watch your score in real time. I enjoy doing FanDuel because I do not like the monotony of a full season of the same players. Also, as said in the copy above, it is great that there are no busted seasons. You get to choose different players every week. Over 2.5 million players have won a cash prize playing fantasy sports on FanDuel. So sign up today. Go to FanDuel.com and click the Join Now button. Use my promo code GameTheory. That's GAMETHEORY. Try FanDuel for free with no deposit required. Visit FanDuel.com to claim your free contest and play for a share of $10,000. Just sign up using the promo code GameTheory. That's FanDuel.com. Promo code GameTheory. Void where prohibited. CJ, let's go on ahead and move on. The Baylor Bears is a team that you kind of keep mentioning here as a group of within this second group here. And I like Baylor. I said last year that I would stop betting against Baylor. Scott Drew, each time of the last 9 years, at some point, this team has been ranked in the top 25. So I don't know why we just stop thinking about this team as being as awesome as they are. Having said that, I'm skeptical about this team. I don't know who leads the offense as a secondary option behind Manu LeConte.
Yeah, I think TJ Maxson steps up. He's a guy that's shown kind of some flashes in the past, but he's been behind Motley. He's pretty skilled and will kind of fit as their like 4 guy that they like to throw it to a lot, and they need somebody skilled playing next to Achul. So I think TJ Maxson's going to be in for a pretty good year, and but other candidates would maybe be like King McClure. They do have Tyson Jolly coming in this year, as a kind of a 2 guard who can get some buckets. He'll replace, I would guess, Al Freeman, which was a weird loss. Like I was surprised when he ended up transferring, I guess, just because that was strange to me. I don't know. Like it's just a funky roster. I don't like. I guess that on one hand, I trust Scott Drew, which is hilarious because what Scott Drew's reputation is. But
the roster talent here is not better than say Oklahoma to me, or it's not better than TCU to me, or Texas. It's
but
just
the track record's there.
The track record's just there, and it's hard to bet against them.
Yeah, Massen's going to be the key. I think he's got to have a really good year for them to be able to challenge for maybe that 2-3 spot. But if as I look at it, I would probably put them. It's almost a coin flip between them and TCU for me, just because I've seen it from Baylor, and I trust some of their guys a little bit more, and you got to trust what Scott Drew's done. I mean, I think one thing that's really underrated with him is not only do they go out and they recruit well, and that they identify guys that they can get and that maybe are a little under the radar, and then I think they develop pretty well. And I think you're going to see that in Maston this year is going to be a guy that steps up and is like a 14, 15 points per game scorer. And people are going to be like, whoa, where'd that come from? But if you've been watching and you see how Drew's, especially with big guys, how he's developed, that's just kind of what happens.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, Scott Drew's really good. They've made the NCAA tournament, each of the last 4 years, 5 out of 6. Every time they've made the NCAA tournament, they've been a top 6 seed over the course of those 6 years. So I guess you're right in that I shouldn't bet against this team. LeConte is a really good offensive player. He needs to improve his efficiency. Achul is a really good defensive player, really good rim protector, runs the floor, can move his feet really well. You're right that I think it comes down to Maston. If Maston can be that secondary offensive weapon, the ceiling for this team is much higher than what I would necessarily project it to be. Let's talk
They might need another handler too, and another guy to just kind of get people involved, and because Manu's kind of more of a combo. Would be better off the ball. I like Jake Lindsey's really, really steady guard, but they could use somebody that could kind of beat you off the bounce, and that might be one area where they're missing somebody this year, but where Wendell Mitchell would have helped. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. So let's go on ahead and move on to Oklahoma, who I think is getting a little bit underrated this year. I think that a lot of people have them in the 8 range, but Trae Young is...
They're better than that, yeah.
Yeah, I think they're a potential NCAA tournament team. Trae Young is going to make an instant difference as a scorer, as a primary ball handler who can put buckets in, who can shoot the basketball. Cam McGusty, you talk to coaches around that league, they think he's probably the most underrated player in their league. He is an impact player, and he was an impact player from day one last year. A double-digit scorer, basically, from day one, and that's a difficult thing to beat. Christian James is a really good player. Kadeem Latin brings experience and has use, at least. Jamuni McNeese, he's just the longest human being this side of Muhammad Bamba. It's a talented team. I don't know necessarily what their depth looks like, but I think that they can get by with their top 5 or 6.
Yeah, I like a lot of their young kids, and they were really kind of starting to figure some things out last season, and they were quietly getting better. Kadeem Latin feels like he's been there forever. He didn't transfer or go to the NBA or anything, right?
He did not, no.
He's been there for forever, and kind of that nice veteran piece they have around. But Trae Young's, I think, really good. I think his body, it might be a little bit of an adjustment to get to the college level. I think he's so skilled and such a heady player that he's going to figure things out pretty quickly. And Christian Doolittle's a kid that I really like. And I know you mentioned McNeese. I think he's probably I'm sure he's a guy you're keeping an eye on because he's kind of a dark horse NBA prospect just because he's so crazy athletic.
Yeah.
That he's a guy that has potential and could really help them on the defensive end. They're just another one of those teams that have a lot of kind of like Texas in that they got a lot of long, bouncy guys, and but yet they've got a little more shooting. So I kind of like how Oklahoma's pieces fit together better than Texas.
Yeah, and we haven't even mentioned Rashard Odoms, who was a really useful player for them last year
sure.
too. So
for sure.
Yeah, no, this is a good team. This is a really good group that I think is going to be. It's going to surprise some people. Like they went I think they won like 10 or 11 games last year. It's not out of the question this team wins 20 games this year. Whether or not that's enough to make the NCAA tournament, we'll see. But I think that they are genuinely a very talented group that, the addition of Trae Young is going to make a marked difference for them.
Yeah, they won 3 of their last 6 though down the stretch in the in the Big 12, and I'm with you. I think here's one name we haven't mentioned. Have we mentioned Lon Kruger?
No, we haven't actually, and
because
incredible.
he's incredible. He's one of the best coaches out there, and he is really really good at when he has like a group for a couple years. A core that's been around for a couple of years, they just get so much better. And I think last year was such a transition year for that team after losing all the dudes that they lost. But for all those young guys to get as much Big 12 action and as much real PT as they did, it's going to come around this season. And I think to me, they're another team that I think could finish in that 3-4 range that, like you said, you've heard them talked about 8th. I'd have them in the upper half.
Yeah, no, I don't know if I'd have them in the upper half, just because a lot of the teams we've mentioned already. I mean, like I wouldn't have them over Baylor. I wouldn't have them over TCU or Texas. I might have them over Texas.
I'd have them over Texas. Yeah, I'd have them over Texas.
They could finish 5th, and it wouldn't be a surprise. But the next team we're going to talk about is another team I would not have them over. I think it'd be really difficult to. Is Kansas State. Kansas State brings back Kamau Stokes, Barry Brown, Xavier Sneed's a guy that I really like. Dean Wade is a really good stretch 4. They have a lot of really solid pieces coming back from an NCAA tournament team last year that, beat Wake Forest in their first round game. I like this group. I think that they can actually do quite a bit of damage.
Yeah, I'm a little higher on Oklahoma, I think, than I am of K-State. And I say that being probably the biggest Bruce Weber defender out there, because I think he does a really, really nice job and is underrated as a coach. But they're really thin up front. I think they're going to probably have to play small with maybe some Xavier Sneed at the 4. But that perimeter group is good. I talked to Bruce a couple of weeks ago, and he really likes Mike McGrew, I think is the kid. How you say the kid's name? A guard out of Connecticut. He said of their new kids, he's probably had the best summer. He's a 6'2" guard. Mm-hmm. So their perimeter group is pretty good. They were really optimistic about Cartier Diarra, I think is how you say the kid. He's a really, really talented guard, but he tore his ACL, so he's out for the year, so that doesn't help. But, man, up front, you just wonder who's going to play that 5 spot for them. And Dean Wade is probably going to be pretty solid and, be a nice 4 guy, but he might have to play some 5. And like I said, with Sneed at the 4 and have that team be one that plays a small a lot. I just don't think they have the depth as some of these other teams that we've talked about, and that concerns me for them.
Yeah, so they lose DJ Wilson inside. Dante Williams, a guy who, got a few minutes for them last year. He ended up transferring, a 7-foot kid. Probably was not necessarily a super high-level player either. I believe that Isaiah Maurice, a guy that also played for them a decent amount, transferred as well.
That one hurt, because I think he probably would have been their starting 5.
Yeah, he probably would have been their starting 5. The biggest loss here, though, is Wes Iwundu. He was their guy that allowed Kamau Stokes and Barry Brown to play off the ball a little bit more often. Iwundu could take over and play point guard for half of a game a lot of the time, just because he's that skilled and that talented at 6'7". But now I would imagine that Kamau Stokes is going to have to play a little bit more of a true point guard role. And I'm intrigued to see how he kind of adjusts to that, because I think that he and Brown are best off when they're just kind of let loose to score. And, it's a good group for sure. It's just a team that, it's hard for me to bet against what, Stokes, Brown, Dean Wade, and, I really like Xavier Sneed, so I would even include him in this group. It's hard for me to bet against what I've seen them do already.
Yeah, I mean, you already hit it on it, though. Wesley was so valuable for them and did so many different things. I mean, there's a reason that kid got drafted. So, they're really, really going to miss him. And while I see that group of juniors taking a step up, they're really going to miss Wandu. So I'm just so concerned with what they have up front and being so thin up front that that's why I'd put like a team like Oklahoma ahead of them, and Texas Tech could jump up above them too with what they return. So K-State's one of those teams that's probably the hardest to place. Like, where would you put them? I think they're the most difficult.
Yeah, let's go on ahead and mention Texas Tech here now. They do bring back a couple of key pieces here. They bring back Keenan Evans. They bring back Zach Smith, who is probably the most athletic player in all of college basketball. I don't really know entirely what to make of this team, though, because Anthony Livingston last year came in from, I believe, Arkansas State. Is that right? Yeah. And made just such a difference for them in the way that they were able to get some efficient offense and really space the floor as well. He hit 40% of his threes as a 6'8" forward. That was huge for them. I'm still just trying to figure out where to place this team. I think they're probably a bottom half of the league team, losing Aaron Ross, losing Livingston, as I mentioned. Devin Thomas was a guy who started for them as well. Losing those three pieces is a little bit rough. Evans and Smith are solid, though. Like those two guys, I think, could really actually get them to the point where they do compete for the middle of the league.
Yeah, I think Zach Smith's potentially an all-league guy, like first-team all-league guy. I love that kid. I think he's got a lot of ability, pretty good shooter for especially how athletic he is. Really big on him. But they're just a wild card because they signed 8 kids, 3 JUCO kids. I mean, with that coaching staff, kind of seeing what they did at Arkansas State, turning around that so quickly. Chris Beard, I think, while none of these kids are like highly regarded, I think he's maybe good at going out there and finding guys, and maybe guys that are kind of under the radar. So it's hard to say just because they have so many new pieces and you don't know what those guys are going to be like. But it's nice to have a guy like Zach Smith and Keenan Evans to kind of know that those are going to be the rocks in the program. And I think Zach Smith's probably one of the more underrated players in college basketball. Yeah,
no, that I agree with. I mean, like you said, I can't really project a lot of these guys. Like Davide Moretti is a kid out of Italy who is, 6'3" shooter, can create a little bit. Who knows how he kind of adjusts to college basketball. I don't know anything about Jarrett Culver or Jair Smith or, even, Malik Ondigo. Like these are names that just aren't really familiar to me, to be honest. Like even as someone who covers this sport as extensively as I do, these guys are lower end recruits, and I tend to stick to like the top 200 guys. And, Chris Beard tends to find these guys and tends to find the best players that he can for his system, and it ends up being great. They bring in Deshaun Corprew and Josh Webster as well from the JUCO ranks. So, maybe those guys make a very key difference here. I just can't you look at it that.
Let's say 3 of those kids hit, and you put those along with Evans, Smith, Stevenson, and Justin Gray. There's your 7 guys, and you've got a decent team. So if 3 of their guys hit, then they could have a nice season. If maybe be like a NCAA tournament bubble team. If none of them hit, then they're really thin. So who knows? Them and K-State, like I said, are probably the those are the 2 that I think are the most hard to project, just because you don't know maybe what some of the newcomers are going to be like.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm not going to lie to you. I just have no idea what Texas Tech could be. Iowa State, let's move on to them. Interesting group here. They do lose a lot because Monte Morris was so critical to what this group did. I mean, for me, a guy that I had ranked as like a top 35 draft prospect last year. They also lose Deontay Burton. They lose Naz Long. They lose Matt Thomas. Like, a lot of talent is walking out the door. They also have some talent coming in. Lindell Wigginton was an excellent signing for them as a, kind of 4 borderline 5-star point guard. But he's still going to take some time, I think. Like, this group, they have Donovan Jackson, they have Nick Weiler-Babb, they have Wigginton. And then beyond that, I mean, Solomon Young maybe could play a bit of a role. It's a tricky
Donovan
spot.
Jackson's.
Yeah,
Did
that's who
you
I
mention
mentioned
him
at
yet?
the top. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry, I spaced out there for a second. I talked to somebody from there the other day. Two names to watch. Zoran Talley, hopefully saying that name right, grad transfer from Old Dominion. I think they like him. And Hans, I'm not Brace. Maybe I can't. I'm not even sure how he's kid out of Princeton, who's like a stretch for somebody they're I think maybe a little optimistic about. So it's going to be tough. I think it's one of those years where it was kind of like for OU last year. You know, you lose so much. It's just no matter how good a coach you are, it's going to be really, really difficult. But now we're kind of going to see what Steve Prohm's what's he made of. You know, how is he going to do it at this spot? Because you know, I thought he's done a nice job his first couple of years in Ames, but he was handed a roster that with some of those experienced guys that they had, it was going to be hard for them to fail. I mean, it's pretty tough when you have Monte Morris to not be a good team. So we're going to see what he's made of, but he has done pretty like you mentioned in recruiting. I think he's had some wins. So they're going to be a team that's interesting to watch here these next couple of years and see what happens.
Yeah, and I do want to bring up again, Lindell Wigginton to me this is a perfect fit in my opinion. He's a guy that is excellent in ball screens, and all of those past point guards that Steve Prohm has had that have been great in his system have been excellent in ball screens. Mm-hmm. He is a guy that is attack oriented. He looks to score more than he looks to pass right now. But, you know, I think he's just going to be such a tremendous fit due to the way that, you know, he is good at attacking in ball screens, and he's capable of, you know, finishing that little mid-range jump shot, or he has like a small little floater, but mostly it's, you know, goes around a screen, you know, speeds up real quick and then hits a step back mid-range shot like that. He has that game right now, and I think that's going to translate to college basketball pretty quickly. You know, maybe even a potential NBA player. It would not surprise me if he developed into that. But beyond him, you know, we've mentioned the other names here. I don't know that we need to go into too much more detail on a team that is, in all likelihood, probably going to finish near the bottom of the league.
Yeah, the 9th or 10th. Most likely. Yeah, the Hilton factor helps a little bit. Maybe they'll steal a couple that they shouldn't, but it's going to be a tough year for them.
So the last team we have here is Oklahoma State. Mike Boynton takes over this program after Brad Underwood's 1 year there. I'm intrigued to kind of see what Boynton can do. They do have Jeff Carroll coming back, you know, potential second round pick in the NBA, I would say. That's an interesting guy that is going to be around. You know, Mitch Solomon, Lucas Gasson, you know, these guys played roles last year at the very least. Averett played a role last year. They do have a couple of transfers they're waiting for, I believe, in Michael Weathers and Yankuba Sema. Not going to be eligible this year, unfortunately, though. I do believe that they get Kendall Smith eligible after a transfer from, I want to say, Northridge out here. That'll be useful to him as well. He came from UNLV and then went to Northridge, and now he's grad transferring to Oklahoma State. They just really, really needed a lead guard that could replace some of what Juwan Evans brought them last year. And I think this year you're going to see just how incredibly valuable Juwan Evans and Brad Underwood together were. Yeah,
I love Juwan Evans. I mean, one of my favorite players in college basketball. I think he was so good. So it's going to be a tough year for them. They're 9th or 10th in the Big 12. I'd probably put them 9th just because they got Jeff Carroll back, and he's going to have a monster year for them to do anything. Like you said, some of their complementary pieces last year were nice, but now you put them in, you know, bigger roles. How are they going to adjust? It's going to be a tough transition year for them. So we'll see. But that's a tough job to take over right there.
Yeah, no. Interested to see what Mike Boynton can do. Has a great reputation as a recruiter. It's definitely unclear on what his coaching chops are at this stage, just on the floor and in game. But, you know, we'll see what happens. I think that it could end up working out for Oklahoma State after just the disaster that is losing Brad Underwood, unfortunately. gun to your head, CJ, how many teams make the NCAA tournament out of the Big 12?
Oh, man. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'll say 6.
Okay, that's not bad. I would say 5. I would say that I would look at Kansas. I would look at West Virginia. I would look at TCU, Baylor.
Those are the locks, probably. You would hope would be the locks.
Yeah. I feel good about that group. I believe that I just named 4, right? So
yeah.
We're at 4. I would say that, Oklahoma, Texas, Kansas State are your 3 that really have a chance to, make
I put
that
Texas
leap.
Tech in that group.
You think Texas Tech? Okay.
I think out of that group,
I just don't know enough about Texas Tech. I'll be honest.
I'm banking on 2 more making the tournament. So that's how I got to 6. I figure those 4 are the others that have a shot. We can basically eliminate Oklahoma State and Iowa State. No shot there. But I think those other 4, I think they've all got a shot. So I say 2 of those. That's how I got to that's the logic behind how I got to 6.
Yeah, I'm going to say 1 of that group makes the tournament. I would set the over-under at 5.5.
Which one do you think it is? Which that group do you like best?
In the preseason, I tend to bet on talent. Texas is the most talented of that group. Shaka Smart is a really, really good coach.
Yeah.
I would probably bet on Texas of that group. And then Kansas State.
I'm betting on Oklahoma there. That would be my pick. But I can understand the logic for picking any of them.
I think that I would set the over under at 5.5 for NCAA tournament teams for the Big 12 this year, right around 5.5. It's going to be a good league. I think it's a little bit worse than what we've seen in the past couple of years, where it's been one of the strongest leagues in the country.
For sure, it's going to take, I'm sure in the RPI, KenPom, where it's been near the top, you're going to see it drop a couple spots to maybe 3, 4.
Yeah, so each of the last, kind of going through here, each of the last 4 years, the Big 12 has been the number 1 ranked league according to KenPom. I would bet that changes this year. I do think that talent around college basketball this season is down a little bit.
Yeah, for sure.
I do think that the Big 12 is probably just a notch below, for me at least. I would certainly say the Big East. It's a notch below the Big East. I would also probably say the ACC as well, notch below that league. Probably, I don't know, maybe just those 2. The SEC and the Big Ten for me are still just a little bit wild cardy, and then the bottom end of the Pac-12 is just a little bit too bad.
Yeah, the Big 12, one of the strengths of the league is they haven't had many awful teams. And I do think it's another year where that's another strength, is Iowa State and Oklahoma State could be pretty bad, but that when you look at the 8th team being a team that we talk about as a potential, the 6, 7, 8 group being potential NCAA tournament teams, just talking about them right now, I think that's going to be the strength of the league again, is the depth of it. But the top, and just you don't have those guys. Kansas has some veterans that are good. West Virginia, we talked about Javon Carter, but you don't have George Niang and guys like Buddy Hield, guys that have been around forever that are really, really good players. Juwan Evans last year. So like you said, I think the talent level just drops a little bit, and the teams in the middle area maybe aren't quite as good.
So yeah, just kind of for reference here, over the course of the last 4 years, the Big 12 has had on average less than 1 team outside of the top 100 in KenPom's rankings. The Pac-12 has had about just under 4 teams outside of the top 100 according to KenPom's ratings. So the bottom ends of the leagues do really hurt the overall strength of these conferences. That's ultimately why, while I might like the top end of a Pac-12 a little bit better than this league, to be honest, I think that both USC and Arizona are better than Kansas this year. I would probably say that, overall strength wise, it's pretty difficult to bet against the Big 12.
Yeah, for sure. I'd maybe argue with you on the Kansas USC point, but whatever. We've talked enough about these teams.
I will say this: in the top 25 preview that I had to submit, I had Kansas over USC because I did not want to look stupid. And betting against Bill Self is something that is really, really stupid. So I just did not do it. But having said that, talent-wise, I do like USC's roster a little bit more. CJ, tell the people where they can find your work.
You can find me on Twitter at CJ Moore. What is my Twitter handle these days? CJ Moore Hoops. And right now I'm kind of a free agent, but hopefully you'll see my work coming here soon.
I can assure you that you will see CJ's work coming soon. He is excellent. Everyone should hire CJ to write more about basketball because he's an incredibly sharp personality who knows what he's talking about.
Except for on the transfer market.
CJ, thanks for coming on, man. I really appreciate it. This has been the Game Theory Podcast. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe to us on iTunes. It really helps us move up in the ratings. We'll be back later this week. I'm trying to kind of record a lot of these because I'm going on vacation next week and just need to decompress basically. So hopefully you will have a lot of podcasts next week. You'll definitely have at least 2 more this week, which is good, but keep it locked here and I'll kind of let you know, keep it locked on my Twitter handle at Sam_VECENIE and we'll be in good shape. So until next time, we'll talk soon. Bye.